Hello, I'm Governor Eric Holcomb. It's a privilege to join you, virtually this year, to recognize the crew of the USS Indianapolis. As a Navy man myself, spending time with you at the annual reunions is always something that I look forward to. I just love hearing the stories shared and the laughter and all the reminiscing about your service and survival. I could not be more inspired every year, or more grateful, or more determined, along with you, to honor our heroic crew members. So many, of course, never made it back home, and those who survived returned forever changed men, knowing they all knew the risk, and yet they were all still willing to lay down their lives. Always, that very fact leaves me in awe and silently speechless. Their bravery preserved the very freedom that our liberty-loving nation craves, for generations not yet born, and inspired generations to follow in their very footsteps. So as we mark this milestone 75th anniversary, I salute the proud heritage, honor, and legacy of all our brave USS Indianapolis heroes. And I look so forward to the day when we can all once again gather in person. May the good Lord continue to bless you all and our great nation and our Indianapolis crew. Thank you.
Each year at our USS Indianapolis Survivors Organization Memorial Service, we honor the memory of the 879 men who were lost at sea. And it is our time-honored tradition for family members and friends to read the names of survivors who have passed. Please join us as we reflect on these great men who are no longer with us.
Leo H. Adams, William R. Akins, Vincent J. Allard, Alan H. Altshuler, Eric T. Anderson,
William R. Andrews, John M. Anunti, John M. Armistead, John T. Ashford Jr., William F. Alt Jr.
Clovis R. Baldridge, Lloyd P. Bartow, Bernard B. Bateman, James A. Bean, Donald L. Beatty,
my husband, James R. Belcher,
Maurice G. Bell, Clarence U. Benton, Concepcion P. Bernasil, Louis P. Batanti,
Brian Blanthorne, Donald J. Blum, Sherman C. Booth, Russell L. Blant, Edward J. Brown, Robert H. Bandridge, my dad, Victor R. Bucket, John K. Bullard, Robert P. Benai, Wilbert J. Bergdorf,
Curtis H. Burton, Hamer E. Campbell Jr., Louis D. Campbell, Grover C. Carter, Lindsay L. Carter, Lloyd G. Carter, Grover C. Carver, John C. Cassidy, Frank J. Centazzo, John D. Chamness.
Orson N. Clark, George W. Clinton, Robert E. Coleman, Charles R. Collier, Homer J. Costner, Donald R. Cohen, my father Lowell Dean Cox, Harold W. Daniel, Louis DiBernardi, Ralph O. Dewing.
William B. Disleski, Gene D. Douglas. My father, William H. Drayton, Joseph E. Dronick, William H. Dryden, Harold A. Eck, Theodore M. Erickson, Louis H. K.O. Irwin, Eugene E. Easier, Claudius Evans.
Archie C. Farmer, Eugene F. Ferris, Fred A. Feeks, Nicholas W. Fedorsky, Donald J. Feltz, Albert E. Ferguson, Johnny W. Fitting, Harold J. Clayton, Verlin L. Fortin, Vern E. Foster.
William H. Fox Jr., Norbert E. Francois, Robert M. Funkhauser, Juan Gabrillo, Angelo Galante, Norman S. Galbraith, Roscoe W. Gardner, Robert P. Gause, Rudolph A. Gemza, Gabriel V. George,
Robert A. Gettleman, Buck W. Gibson, James Gilcrease, Millard Glad Jr., J. R. Glenn, Thomas G. Goff, William L. Gooch, Willis L. Gray, Tolbert Green Jr., Charles I. Greenlee.
Jacob Greenwald, Robert L. Griffith, Harley C. Hanson, Cecil M. Harrison, Fred J. Hart, Willie Hatfield, Harlan C. Havener, Otha A. Havens, Louis L. Haynes, John Heller,
Erwin F. W. Hench, Clarence L. Hirschberger, Lyle L. Hind, John R. Hinken Jr., Howard H. Hodge, Gordon H. Hoops, Derward R. Horner, George J. Horvath, William O. Hoskins, Richard E. Hawk,
John D. Howison, Joseph F. Hubaley, Max M. Hughes, Clarence E. Hupka, Woodrow Hurley,
Melvin C. Jacob, Joseph A. Jackmott, Woody E. James, my father, James K. Jarvis, Eugene W. Jensen,
William A. Johnson, Clinton L. Jones, Sidney Jones, Raymond S. Jerkowitz, Robert E. Justice, Gust K. Katsikas, Walter Kazmierski, Chalice E. Keys, David P. Kemp, Jr., Oliver W. Kenley.
Dio E. Kirby, Edward H. Keyes, My Sweet Dear A.C. Tony King, Raymond A. Kinzel, Marvin F. Kirkland, Joseph F. Kaselika, James W. Kiddo, Ralph D. Klappa, Joseph F. Klaus, Edward C. Koch.
George Coziera, Clifford E. Craze, Dale F. Kruger, Norman F. Kruger, George R. Kurlick, my father Michael N. Carilla Jr., Ralph Lane, Kenley M. Lanter, Carlos LaPaglia, George E. Laws.
My father, Arthur L. Linerman, Thomas H. Lockwood, James B. Loftus Jr., Daniel B. Lopez, Sam Lopez, Robert A. Lucas, Frank J. Luca, Melvin A. Moss, Harold A. Mace, Donald F. Mack.
Anthony F. Madej, Chester J. Makaroff, Salvador Maldonado, Joseph J. Molina Jr., Joseph J. Malski, John Matrula, Farrell J. Maxwell, my dad, Donald C. McCall, Raymond B. McLean, Giles G. McCoy,
Millard V. McCrory Jr., Clarence E. McElroy Jr., Walter E. McFall, Paul W. McGinnis, Robert M. McGuigan, Lauren C. McHenry Jr., Ernest E. McKenzie, Charles B. McKissick, Henry T. McClin, Patrick J. McLean.
Charles B. McVeigh III, Richard C. McVeigh, Charles E. Meredith, Nestor A. Mestis, Charles T. Meyer, Joseph Mikolayak, Glenn L. Milbrot, Herbert J. Miner II, James E. Mitchell, Kenneth E. Mitchell,
Norval J. Mitchell Jr., Clarence C. Milady, Carl E. Modisette, Melvin W. Modisher, Joseph J. Moran, and my dad, Glenn G. Morgan.
My grandfather, Eugene S. Morgan, Albert O. Morris, Morgan M. Mosley, Ted E. Morey,
John J. Muldoon, William R. Mulvey, Paul J. Murphy, H. B. Myers, Joseph A. Naspini, Edward J. Nelson, Frank H. Nelson, James F. Newhall, James C. Nichols, William O. Nightingale,
Daniel M. Nixon, James A. Norberg, Troy A. Nunley, Alexander C. Nuttall, Mike G. Obeldo, James E. Jimmy O'Donnell, John Olahar, Frank H. Orsburn, Felton J. Outland, Thurman D. Overland,
Keith N. Owen, Curtis E. Pace,
Jose C. Pacheco, Adelor A. Palmater, Richard A. Parabeck, Lyle M. Paskett, Luther D. Hulk, Edward G. Payne, Santos A. Pena, Basilio Perez,
Edward C. Perkins, Avery C. Peterson, Huey H. Phillips, Paul Podish, Clifford A. Podsion, Herman C. Pogue, Gerald M. Poor, Dale F. Potts, James D. Price, William C. Quealy, Jr.
Ricardo Ramirez, Wilson Rathbone, John H. Radin, Richard B. Redmayne, Chester O.B. Reeves, Herbert A. Rayner, Curtis F. Reed, James E. Reed, John Reed, Tommy L. Reed,
Alfred P. Reynolds, Raymond A. Rich, Earl Riggins, Francis H. Renee Jr., Norman H. Roberts, John D. Robeson, Ralph G. Rogers, Ross Rogers Jr., Virgil M. Russell, Don W. Satoff,
Fernando S. Sanchez, Osceola C. Scanlon, Harold J. Schutterly, John A. Schmuck, Clark W. Siebert, my dad, Arthur L. Suchfield, Robert P. Schaefer, William H. Sharp, Harold J. Shearer, Donald H. Schoen,
Audie B. Shows, William E. Simpson, my father, Ray Sinclair, Henry J. Sytek, Wayne L. Sladek, Jack C. Slankard, Charles H. Smeltzer, Cozell Lee Smith Jr., Frederick C. Smith, Andre Sospizio,
Daniel F. Spencer, Roger H. Spencer, John A. Spinelli, Miles L. Spooner, my grandfather Florian M. Stam, Richard P. Stevens, George G. Stevens, Glenn W. Stewart, Elwin L. Studervant, Frank E. Suter,
Charles H. Twatter, Ivan M. Thomas, David A. Thompson, William C. Thurkettle, John Mickey Toretta, Charles M. Turner, Harlan M. Twimble, Paul R. Uffelman, my grandfather Lyle E. Ummenhofer, Ralph E. Underwood,
Joseph W. Van Meter, Werner B. Walker, Charles O. Wells, George A. Whiting, Lindsay Z. Wilcox, Stanley Wisniewski, my friend John Woolston, Charles W. Zink.
Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm doth bind the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. O hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. God be with you till we meet again. By his counsel's guide uphold you. With his sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet, till we meet. Till we meet at Jesus' feet, till we meet. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet, till we meet. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet, till we meet. God be with you till we meet again.